Hey folks, it's Nate. Thanks for joining me at the art table again today. It is my hope to be able to put out the first Roy Harper story collection entitled Have Spell Will Travel at the beginning of next year. As we build to that, I thought it would be fun to share with you a little bit of the lore of the Columbian West. If you've read any of the Roy Harper adventures, you know that Columbia, the nation where Roy lives, is loosely based on the history of the United States. However, the civilizations and history of the world are different enough from ours that while things look similar, the actual events are very different. I thought it would be a fun and hopefully interesting exercise to go and look at some of those events, things that have happened before Roy's story begins, and fill in some of the gaps so you have a better idea of what the world is like. Many of these things are relevant to Roy's life, but not things that are particularly relevant to the stories I tell about him. And so there's not really a lot of opportunity to explore these things in any depth. Our first lore video then is going to cover the Lakeshire War, probably the most definitive event in Roy Harper's life, and one of the things that shaped the nation of Columbia as it is today. Now, technically the Lakeshire War begins in the year 859, but we're not really going to talk a whole lot about that in this video. I do hope to do a video on the general events of the Lakeshire War and how Roy Harper and a few other major characters fit into them, but right now I'm going to talk a little bit about what caused the Lakeshire War, because the Lakeshire War was not just a war over territory or economics, although those things were very important to it. It was also a war about the nature of the nation of Columbia. So if you've read any of the Roy Harper adventures, you know that Columbia is broken down into a number of counties. Counties each have their own government. The exact structure of a county government varies from county to county. For our purposes, the important thing is that each one is supposed to be distinct and autonomous. All counties in Columbia then have a seat in the national government in the city of Hancock. Early in the life of Columbia, an order of knights established by Arthur Phoenixborn, the first king of Avalon, would establish a center of power in Lakeshire County. There, in the moraines left by receding glaciers, they built a stone circle, and they dubbed it Morainehenge. It became a place of power and a place of learning. And it made the Lakeshire County very important in the surrounding area. So much so that over the next couple of hundred years, other counties around Lakeshire, and eventually many hundreds of miles from Lakeshire, began to look at Palmyra, the capital of Lakeshire, as kind of the center of the region, much in the same way that Chicago is kind of the center of the Midwest, or at least was for a long time. Now, an upshot of this was that the Knights of the Stone Circle became regarded as almost a paramilitary police force. They were very learned men, and they occupied many places of government. They served as circuit-riding judges. They served as traveling sheriffs or other kinds of law enforcement. At the same time, the Knights of the Stone Circle were not official government figures. They weren't exactly a secret society. Everyone knew who the Knights of the Stone Circle were. And if you could meet the very stringent physical, mental, and magical requirements, anyone could join. However, while people would come from all over Columbia to join the Knights of the Stone Circle, the Knights tended not to go back out very far from their seat of power near Palmyra. So many of the best and brightest went to Lakeshire and then stayed there. And the Knights were a secretive bunch. They didn't share much of their techniques or understanding with the people around them. Not even people in their own county got too deep of a look at what the Knights could do. And so, as the Knights and the governments they influenced consolidated more and more into a single power block, the rest of the nation became a little more resentful. In the meantime, to the south, a very different magical tradition was taking root in a small town along the Mississippi River. This town, initially called Huntstown, played host to a very esoteric group of craftsmen, immigrants from the Dolomite region who practiced a kind of magic known as Vulcan magic. Where the Knights of the Stone Circle were secretive and elite, Vulcan mages built very simple magic structures out of bits of metal that anyone could power with a simple open flame. Because it was so simple and anyone could use it, Vulcan magic spread over Columbia very quickly. Huntstown would eventually change its name to Volcanus and would become another center of learning and power. Eventually, these two centers of power would clash. It was, in some ways, inevitable. They were too different in their approaches and philosophies for anything else to happen. But how it happened may be particularly unfortunate. In the year 858, members of the Knights of the Stone Circle heard tell of a Vulcan magician by the name of Joachim Immelman in a small town named Avangard, who was working on a new magical array. Immelman was a SkyTrain engineer, and supposedly he was working on a way to build a better SkyTrain locomotive. However, in the process of working on his array, Immelman was causing a number of strange and suspicious events to happen around the town of Avangard. Now, Avangard was outside of Lakeshire proper. In fact, it wasn't even in one of the counties that technically looked the seat of Lakeshire government for guidance. Avangard was in Cheshire County, which was just outside the Lakeshire sphere of influence, but not really anywhere near Volcanus. You might think of this as neutral ground. But when the Knights of the Stone Circle caught wind of what was happening there, they took it upon themselves to investigate. And remember, this is a not quite secret society of some of the most skilled wizards in the continent. On the one hand, it may be reassuring that they showed up to investigate strange goings-on in this little town, far from the nation's centers of learning and power. However, what the Stone Circle ultimately decided to do was confiscate Immelman's array, destroy his research notes, and tell him he should never try and build one of the things again. A week after the Knights of the Stone Circle left, Joachim Immelman was found hanging from the rafters of his workshop. Cheshire County had had enough. They contacted Volcanus, and they asked them for help. A month later, the Volcanus militia was mustered and marched north toward Avangard. That was the beginning of the Lakeshire War, and the beginning of the end for the Stone Circle. Be sure to tune in next week as we take a look at the early years of the war and how each side chose to prosecute it, and ultimately, what the national government in Hancock decided to do to bring it to an end. In the meantime, let me know what you thought of this video down in the comments below. I know it's a little bit different from what I do, but hopefully you found it interesting. While you're down there, there's a like button and a subscribe button. You can use those as you see fit, and I'll talk to you later.